we're going to get started. Thanks everybody for sitting and waiting. And what we're going to start with is a song from JJ, which has come out of the Dearg movement, so the Irish language movement of the last while. And this place being a bit of a central hub to all of that, and the activism that come out of here, and the youth movement and all that's growing around the school community. So we'll give a bit of quiet for JJ, and then we're going to get started with the day. So, Jay, any more words? So, I'm the word shot. Agila told you were Briha. Gail, lift your hearts. Okay?
So everybody can join in as well. Dearg is a youth and community organisation that works through the medium of Irish, and we were established in 2004. The centre here was built in 2016, and from that time, Gael and Phobail has been a hub of community activity. We talk about this place as a liberatory space where we open the doors for debate and discussion and events like these. So we're very, very honoured to be working with PPR and the Change Initiative, Social Change Initiative, and we'll have a whole array of events on today. I'm also making us aware that we have the program of events is being streamed on Facebook Live. So if anybody has 4G and they want to share the program or the talks as they happen, feel free to do so. But at the same time, can I also ask you, and taking the phone in the good hand, if you can put them on silent, please, on silent or on airplane mode. That was a paradox there. Share stuff, but put your phone on silent. That's the new age of a living. So before we hand over to Marissa, who's going to be our chair for the rest of today, we must give Welsh War Creole a horse the Féile Women's Choir who are going to come up now. Féile, the Women's Choir. Sarah boys, what's your ready to go? Bill Bus over work, For anybody who had the pleasure of being in the monastery on Monday night, I would have had the pleasure of hearing the women at Ciarán. So they're going to sing the South African national anthem, Bill Bus over work, Féile Women's Choir.
Africa. Who's going to turn the event, and Bernadette Mc Aliskey, who's allowed to be late because it's Bernadette Mc Aliskey, right? So I'm saying nothing. She's going to walk through this door at any minute. I just know it. So I'm just going to run through the order of today. We're going to launch this website, Lessons for Change, before Martin's going to chair a discussion around the lessons from the various activists up on the panel, before some questions and answers, and most importantly, food at the end. Because I know that's why the majority of us are here. It's not right, Fiona? And so, yeah. So, why are you here today? This month, right about this month, 2 years ago, myself and Sean Brady were awarded a Social Change Initiative Fellowship after being nominated by PPR, an organisation that I can now say proudly that I work for, that is very close to my heart, and I think it's only fair that we take a moment to remember and show amazing gratitude to its founder, Ms. McCormick, a woman who, like many of us in the room, if we've had the pleasure of working with her, know that she was remarkable, and she believed in me, she supported me and my activism, and I just want to say thanks to Vinny, who's here today, her husband, for coming all the way up and supporting us. I really appreciate it. As many people as possible of the lessons that we've learned. I know where's Fergal and Nell and Reg, who said this was a junket, jolly. Didn't believe us, we were actually away working. I want to inform you of some of the lessons that we've learned along the way in terms of the people we met, places we seen, the organisations that hosted us, and their principles, their tactics, their strategies, and how they're trying genuinely to make change in an unequal society. Sean's going to launch the website and talk more about the type of people we met, and you can see pictures and stuff around the wall. It's just some of the organisations and some of the work that they do. I think it's fair to say we knew what we were signing up to in terms of we wanted to go away, we wanted to learn, we wanted to bring back ideas, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, I don't think we anticipated how much more that we got from it. The sense of camaraderie. I mean, there's people in the room with Zelda, with Thapelo, Teresa, people that we met through this fellowship that we are in contact with on almost a daily basis. I personally have made genuine friendships that I try to imagine what my life was like before these people. I can't. It's impossible to think that they weren't in my life, all my life. I want to thank SCI for opening up this wider network, and allowing us into Martin and Eleanor and Padraig for allowing us access to people and organisations that we otherwise wouldn't have had access to. Before I hand over to Sean, I have a load of thank yous and for fear of leaving anybody out, okay? I want to thank firstly the panel for being here, and Bernadette, whenever she comes, thanks. For Lorna, for the Féile, for having us as partner, for that wonderful, how do we follow this choir? I mean, the rest of the day is not going to compare, is it? And JJ, for the creative workers, I know we had your heart broke, for helping us in this website. PPR in general, for all your support throughout the fellowship, for this week's leading up to the launch of this. Most importantly, just want to bother me for saying it, but I will dance it because I know I personally have given you sleepless nights, so thank you so much. For friends and family and everybody here, my daughter wanted to ask specific shout out because apparently she was the one that let me go away. And that's last night while I was practicing why I didn't thank her. So thanks, Lucia, I appreciate it. And I'd like to catch you. Teresa and stuff in the room, I really appreciate you coming up. I really, really do. I want to personally thank Sean Brien for, I know he's rolled his eyes, like what's coming next, for sharing this fellowship with me and for allowing me to that's emotional getting out of me. But most importantly, the last thank you for everybody that features in this site. If it wasn't for these people, first of all, we wouldn't have a site, and I can't thank them all enough for opening up their hearts, their homes, their communities, their organisations, and allowing us in. I really appreciate it. So over to Sean for the launch of the website. Am I correct? Yes?
Fluid bus from Marissa, who's been a burden all the time. Right, anybody who knows me knows I'm not the tech guy, so I'm going to try and talk about the tech here, but I don't really claim or something could be able to do that at some later date. Essentially what this website is a collation of interviews on site with activists in their environments as and when they were moving and shaking and we were running with them. So sometimes the audio isn't good, and sometimes the interviews aren't great, and sometimes what we captured are only snippets, but that's all it is. It's like a doorway into amazing people. So that's how it should be viewed. It shouldn't be viewed as a fait accompli analysis on how to do business. It shouldn't be viewed as a, we have all the answers, and it shouldn't be viewed that the campaigns contained within it are flawless, without flaw, without humanity or any of that, you know what I mean? But that being said, I personally feel like I know what I have got out of 2 years travelling the world to New York, Boston, New Jersey, Cape Town, Durban, and bumping into people wrestling with the same versions of problems that we were wrestling with here. So I know what I have got out of it. I've soaked that stuff up to as much as I can, and it's been priceless. So it's reformed and formed me again, and that's what we're hoping that some of this can be. It can be access to people like Thapelo Mohapi of Abalahli, and it can be access to people like Charlene Carruthers from Young Black Lives 100, formed it in the middle of the Black Lives Matter movement, and it can be access to Charnel Commando on the streets of Woodstock, occupying buildings to push for housing for black and coloured families getting pushed out of Cape Town by white money and power. So it can be a portal for anyone, and a portal to Dearg and all the great stuff that we're building here in Belfast and in Ireland, and some type of access point for people to start touching on those bits of lessons and learning that's going on everywhere, the positive stuff that's going on everywhere. Because often we'll have these meetings and we'll have the activist meetings, and we'll do an hour and a half of how miserable the world is. 3 or 4 minutes about, okay, well, who's going to organise the next protest? And then we'll leave and go and get a load of beers, drown our sorrows. This website should be, and this conversation should be about, look at what we're doing. Look at the stuff that we're achieving. In the face of serious odds, people are organising in communities all over this planet, creating change, not waiting on change, building change. You know what I mean? And one of the best examples, and Thapelo will talk about it, is Abalahli. People without houses, building homes and societies in the face of big capital and big power, getting shot off the streets at the same time as they're building communities and creches and schools and facilities and a new narrative about how human beings can conduct their business and their affairs. So that's what we hope people start getting a wee bit of a touchcloth into, and we hope people add more. So probably the most important feature of this site is the add your lesson bit. And I hope you today, you do all the tech, you take the site and you share it, and you go on the Facebook page and you do all that bit. But I hope as well, because everybody in this room has some type of contribution to make to the narrative around how we make change. So I hope you tap into it. I hope you share your lessons and that type of stuff too. Just on the technical bit, so this is the bear with me bit, right? What the site is I hope you can see the scrolling thing. So we have captured case studies where we were sort of deep with organisations for a period of time and studied sort of everything that they've done, the principles, structure, strategy and tactics that define them. And we put them up as case studies, one in Belfast, which is our own organising, one in Cape Town and one in New York, New Jersey. Indefunu Kwasi, who were in Cape Town, evolved from an organisation that was fighting for land justice into one that's currently involved in fairly dangerous occupations in the city of Cape Town, but there's a massive evolution that they went through on that journey. There was litigation, there was protest, there was engagement with government, there's a sophisticated activist apparatus behind it. It wasn't just a bunch of people occupying a piece of land. And that's why it has longevity, but it's also built on other people's learning, like Abalahli. So those case studies give you a bit of a, like through video, through audio, through interviews, will hopefully give you a bit of a sense of how did that evolve. Because if you're going to get involved in a bit of an occupation yourself, you might want to know how to go about it, where does it start, is it useful, what can we learn from it, how did you achieve anything, did you achieve anything? So you can get a sense of that. The other ones were like a sort of composite of lessons from home, and by home we mean, we travelled to Grenfell and we met people there who were, their relatives were burned to death because the government failed to invest in their housing. The government failed to invest in their lives and failed to see them as human beings. So 72 people were burned to death in the Grenfell in a preventable fire, and those people, homeless still, campaigning for justice and dignity. So we consider that where we went in England, Scotland, Ireland, North and South, to be home in respect to this site, we've captured lessons across the campaigns from the Travellers in Cork through to Housing for All, Refugees and Asylum Seekers in Belfast, through to Equality Can't Wait, mothers and children in North Belfast campaigning for justice around housing as well. So lessons from South Africa is all of that, the organisations we bumped into in South Africa, and there are many more, and a sort of taster and a portal to them. And lessons from the USA is the same. All the organisations we see that we met on the ground in those destinations. Probably, and so there's a blog obviously which covers our journey as we went, and Ciarán Mac Giolla Bhéin is going to be the first guest blog on that blog, and Bernadette Mc Aliskey is going to be the second one. So there's going to be that type of feature where people can write narratives and all of that. And the most important thing for me, but is this, and I hope it works, hope the technology doesn't blow up in my face. Okay, it's the people section. Through every one of these people, there's some type of access to learning and organising, and we feel that that's the most important section of the site. The story they told, the lesson we learned from them, and what they're up to at the minute is probably the best part of this site. It was definitely the best part of our experience, meeting real human beings on the ground. Not academics writing about it and not narratives from without, but people on the ground in their own situations explaining this is how we do business. So Irene from the Domestic Workers Association in New York, who had organised people who were essentially trafficked as slaves to the United States, and organised as slaves in the United States, and get paid less in a year than some other slave owners get pay on their shoes in a week, you know what I mean? They had organised and forced a budget, forced the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights in the legislature in New York with illegal humans, illegal people. So how, if you can organise that sort of cadre of people, domestic workers trafficked to the States without status, to change the legislature, and then the next lesson you're going for is, where's the money? There's organising to be done with anyone. So Irene is one, and there are many, many, many more as you sort of scroll through it. Every single one of them, priceless learning in their situations and where they're at. So hopefully that gets a bit of an explanation of what the website is, how we pulled it together, and all of that. And I'm going to hand over and we're going to draw out some more lessons for change from amazing activists sitting in front of us, and one who most definitely better be coming through the door any minute now. But in the absence of Marissa, we're not going to sit down there. Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for
I'm Martin O'Brien. I'm from the Social Change Initiative, and I'm delighted that Marissa and Sean asked me to kind of facilitate or chair this session. Maybe just to say a little bit about Social Change Initiative. We're a Belfast-based international NGO, and we try to do two things. The first is that we're trying to improve the effectiveness of activism for social change, to make activists better at what they do. And the second thing that we do is try to influence the way in which activism is funded. So we're trying to make donors and people who are trying to support social change, we're trying to make them better at what they do as well. One of the things that we do is that we provide a fellowship scheme. And I suppose our whole approach is based on the idea that change is hard to get. And so one of the best things you can do is improve and enhance the effectiveness of people who are working for change. And one of the best ways you can do that is to allow people to learn from others. So learn from other people, reflect on on your own practice, how you've been getting on. Very often people just move from one fight to the next, from one struggle to the next. They don't often get the time to think about what they did, what worked, why did it work, what could we do better. And so the fellowship scheme that we have has supported so far 24 activists from all over the world, and Sean and Marissa are two of those. And I have to say that that community of people, and Marissa kind of alluded to it, in addition to giving these people time to take time out and to reflect and to grow their skills, one of the other things that we've been doing is bringing them together, and that has been one of the most powerful things. And the solidarity part of this is, I think, as important as the break and the time to reflect. And you got a glimpse of that solidarity today with our colleagues here from South Africa and the South African National Anthem. Pretty special kind of thoughtfulness and thinking that goes on, but also very practical, tangible support that people are providing to each other. Many of these activists working in very, very challenging situations. People from, I think we have 11 or 12 different countries represented. I have to say, and this is not prejudice on my part, but I have to say that Sean and Marissa are, and I think people in this room won't be surprised, but Sean and Marissa are held in the highest esteem by that group of activists, who are among some of the most impressive activists from around the world. What we've tried to do with the fellowship is to find people who might not normally get an opportunity like this. And I suppose we're delighted today to see the fruits of this in the shape of this website, and delighted to see it being launched here in the community in West Belfast with a lot of people who are working themselves for social change in a very active, committed, dedicated way. So a lot of sweat and tears and work went into the production of this, not just by Sean and Marissa, but with the other people who helped them. And so I just like to congratulate them on the achievement and really encourage people to take a look at it. As I say, change is hard to get, and there are lots of examples of people here who are working at it, and we can all learn from everybody else. So with that brief introduction, I suppose what we wanted to do was spend just a little bit of time talking to 3 activists who have a great deal of experience in this field, to sort of give a bit more of a texture to the kind of stuff that's in the website. So what I'd like to do maybe is ask Thapelo maybe to start and just say a little bit about, to just explain a little bit about the kind of activism that he's involved in and that he has been involved in, and the challenges and difficulties that they face. Some of you might have had the opportunity to listen to him the other evening in a very compelling and moving and disturbing presentation about South Africa. So it's great to have Thapelo here, and if you wouldn't mind just talking for, and I'll stop you if you go on too long, for about 5 or 10 minutes, just to give us a flavour of the issues that you're working on. And we're just so pleased to have you with us here in Belfast. We're so appreciative of you making the journey and so grateful to have you with us. So maybe if you would...
Thank you very much, Martin. First and foremost, I think it would be a crime for me not to first and foremost thank the choir that was here today for bringing us back to what we hoped for. The national anthem that they sang was the national anthem that we thought it was going to be sung in South Africa. The one that you hear these days that includes Afrikaans, which is an oppressor's language, is a compromised national anthem. So this one was the national anthem which our fathers, our grandfathers who were in exile, who were fighting against the evils of apartheid, my comrade there will agree with me. This was the actual national anthem that we wanted to incorporate into the new South Africa that we had hoped for, all of us. So that was great work. I think I will go home and share this, and as I share this, I'm sure people at home will be revived to actually fight against the evils that we are facing in the post-apartheid South Africa. But as has been said, my name is Thapelo Mohapi. I am from South Africa. I am from a shack dwellers movement called Abalahli Basemondjolo, which simply means the residents of the shacks. Well, the South African government often says we are actually a disgrace and embarrassment to them because we are not supposed to call ourselves that. But the reality is that this is the kind of situation that we live under. I am here to speak not on behalf of shack dwellers, because I'm also a shack dweller myself. I'm also subjected to fire. My shack in 2012 was burnt and I lost everything. I also face evictions, massive evictions that are taking place in Durban, in KwaZulu-Natal, and in fact in all over South Africa, where an ANC-led government who is supposed to deliver services for the people is actually oppressing and repressing the people. I come from a movement which has lost more than, rather 16 to date. 16 activists have been killed, have died in the hands of the ANC-led government. And that we have proof of it because in 2013, one of our leader in one of the branches was shot 7 times, a woman, by 2 ANC ward councillors. Her crime was to actually uncover the corruption that was taking place in terms of the allocation when it came to the social housing in South Africa. So we say this without fear, without favor, without prejudice, that it is the ANC that continues to kill our members. So Abalahli Basemondjolo been forgotten by the ANC-led government. When we went into 1994 elections, I had hoped that I would not by this time be living in a shack. But both my parents have died living in a shack. Living in a shack, it is a very inhuman condition. As I've said, you are subjected to fire, you are subjected to floods. Comrades, Sean has been to my place where I stayed. It is a terrible place for anyone to stay. We are living like pigs in the mud. The inhuman conditions there, the health hazards and everything else. But the ANC government continues to use funds which are supposed to support the people who are living in shacks like myself to actually buy hitmen, hire people to actually kill activists. As I've said, to date, 16 activists have died in my movement in the hands of the ANC. Some of the cases have not been investigated by the police because they do not want to high-profile people in politics to be arrested. Right now, as I speak, I don't live in my house. Our movement is, at this point in time, facing a very high repression and attack. We have been informed by some of the good people in the police that there is a hit that is imminent within our leaders as we speak. So where I come from, killing an ordinary activist it costs around 7,000 rand. So you can pay somebody to carry. This is something that is done openly. Recently, the mayor of eThekwini municipality, which is a municipality in Durban, has what came out very touchy was there was a community in Cato Crest in Durban where the municipality had come and demolished their shacks because evictions, when you are living in a shack, the municipality will hire what is called the anti-land invasion units. The anti-land invasion unit is an armed force of the city to actually carry out and remove people at gunpoint and even kill people in the process. So in this community, people have been evicted more than 12 times, and people resisted and started building their sheds. And we had to go into court, because I must say this, that the judiciary system in that country is the only hope that we have. If there was no judiciary in our country that is independent at this point in time, we would have be living in the streets and be homeless. But we have taken the very same government through the constitution that they claim to be custodians of, that they have created, and tested them in court. And the court will say whatever they did was unconstitutional and it was invalid with the constitution. But because the ANC thinks that they are law unto themselves, with a court order that prevents them from evicting people, they will continue evicting people and so on. But we'll continue as a movement, politically organized from grassroots, encourage people to resist these evictions, to actually go and face, because as much as we die in the struggle, one thing for sure is that we need to create homes, not for us, but for the next generation. We need to break the system now. If it means that in the process our lives, as Mandela has said, it is an ideal that we are prepared to lay our lives for. If it means that I'm going to die, at least my children will have a good story to say, my father died fighting a good fight. My father died trying to make a living for me. My father died trying to get me out of the slums, out of this inhuman condition. We live with rats in the sheds. Rubbish. There are no municipal services provided to us. We live with rats. Children have been beaten by rats and killed by rats. Rats bigger than the cats. So it is a very inhuman condition. So the police, after this community was protesting against these evictions that happened more than 12 times, then decided to open fire in the crowd. A young girl, 17-year-old Ngobile Nzuza, was killed by the police. Well, in that also we have find closure, because one of the police that was shooting, in fact the police who shot this young girl was sentenced to 10 years in imprisonment. So we have proof that people in the movement, activists, are dying in the hands of a government that is supposed to actually deliver these services. So I'm here to say that the ANC or the South Africa that has been painted as a new dawn, as a new South Africa, I have not experienced it. For the 24 years I have been suffering. For the 24 years. And in fact, I even say it is better during the apartheid, because even though there were inhuman conditions that my parents were living under, they knew that the white government did not like black people. But now we are oppressed by our own comrades, people whom we voted for, people whom we continue to put in power, are calling us a dead force when we question the way corruption is taking place in Durban. So this is what is happening. I know that I'm painting a dim picture for some of you, because some of you think that South Africa, I mean, it's a glorified country. I was very touched, the welcoming that has happened here. I'm very touched by the national anthem, what was supposed to be the national anthem, because South Africa is perceived to be a rainbow nation, but the inequalities that are taking place there, the whites who benefited from the apartheid regime are still in dominance. Where I live, in the informal settlements, Comrade Sean has seen, there is a suburb of the white community who make sure that the councillor remains a white person, so that we continue to be oppressed. And they make it very clear that no development will take place or houses will be built for us, because whatever houses government will build will devalue their mansions and big houses. So this is what is happening in South Africa, the inhuman conditions that are taking place. I want to clarify to you that we are living like pigs in the mud in post-apartheid South Africa. But I'm glad that I come from a movement that has more than 52,000 membership, and it is organizing and fighting and resisting this kind of oppression. And being in a home like that also makes me feel that I'm important in life, that I'm able to raise issues, even though the government does not want to listen to me. I come from an organization that has decided to create its own authority, where we connect our own electricity, where we connect our own water, where we build our own community creches, because outside of the state. And the very reason why the ANC attacks us and kills us is because we are accused of creating an authority that is outside of the government. Because if you organize outside of the ANC, you are bound to be the enemy, you are bound to be the spy, you are bound to be called names, and you are bound to be removed. And being removed means assassination. So that's the picture I wanted to paint to people in Ireland. That South Africa that you thought it is not to be. I'm saying this not as a visitor, as somebody who comes in South Africa and lives, or somebody who lives an average life and representing people who are living in the shack. I'm saying this as a shack dweller, as somebody who lost his parents, living in a shack, and I'm still living in a shack today. Thank you very much.
Sure there'll be questions, but what I want to do is take the sort of three presentations, and then we'll open up hopefully for people to have a bit of discussion. So we've heard a little bit about the challenges and the activism and the very effective and compelling work of this 52,000 strong social movement in South Africa of people who need the change, working to get the change themselves. I want to turn now to Ciarán, and just if you would maybe tell us a little bit about the activism and the campaigns for change that you've been involved in.
Well, reduced para one more ways all the Martin agus this PPR as celebrating taka yanati agus as encourage and show news. Want to thank Martin and the PPR in particular for the great work they do constantly to support all of us on our rights. And also for giving me the invitation here today. It's an absolute honour. I mean, I grew up listening to Bernie and being very privileged to listen to her, and I sharing a platform is an absolute honour. And obviously, Thapelo was a very compelling story as well. You know, obviously we're not dealing with those type of circumstances, far from it. Although, you know, the activism is something that is maybe shared, maybe we can learn from. I suppose that's the whole point of the SCI, of these exchanges. I'm not usually kind of note dependent, but there's a large amount of coding coursing through my body these days. So my head is slightly hazier than what it usually is. So I've jotted down a few notes to make sure that I make all the points that I wanted to make. Instead of kind of charting the development of our movement, because I probably wrongly presumed that a lot of people in the room have been keeping an eye on abreast of the news over the last 2 years and are really aware of what had happened. Instead of really focusing too much in on that, what I wanted to do was to give some of the context to why that this activism is important, and the context in which these activists are inspired and become involved in this type of work. And first and foremost, we're language activists, people that are involved in the revival. This is a campaign that's driven by Irish speakers, people that are incredibly genuine about the revival of our native language. And to put that in a global context, the linguists have divided languages into 4 categories. And at the bottom of this pyramid, if you like, they're what they call peripheral languages. They make up 98% of the languages that are spoken in the world, but they're only spoken by 10% of the population. And a lot of the top linguists are very concerned that a lot of those languages will be lost by the end of this century. So the efforts that we're undertaking here are first and foremost about ensuring that Irish isn't one of those languages that are lost. And it requires decisive action like this to ensure that that doesn't happen. Because I think we can all agree, due to the onset of global capitalism in the past century, we've been losing diversity at every level of biology and culture, and I think everyone agrees that that's a bad thing. Nobody wants to see that happen. And just like the environment, measures are needed to protect languages from this erosion. In more recent times, neoliberalism has attempted to create a kind of consensual conformity around language, but we will know, obviously, from our own experience and our own history, that issues of language are inextricably linked to questions of power and to questions of identity. And as we see those neoliberal power structures begin to unravel, you can see more assertive and violent reactions against diversity of all kinds, and in particular language. And you only have to look at anyone who's on Facebook, who has the misfortune of being on Facebook. You see the videos coming from America of people being attacked for speaking Spanish. And as the professor of history, Gary Jotuhi, put it, because of the particular nature of conquest and power structures that has fostered, it's impossible to separate the question of language from the question of politics. It can't be done. In the north, where we are, and organisations like Corona here, the Irish language communities and Irish language revival is rooted in working class areas. It's communities that have been victims of generational marginalisation and discrimination. That is where the Irish language is strongest. And many of whom have learned Irish to attain a level of consciousness and to challenge this neoliberal consensus. We saw with the Leafer bursary scandal and the attacks, the constant attacks on Irish medium schools and the culturally racist insults bandied about by senior politicians, that they are all derived, I would argue that they're all derived contemporaneously and historically in our colonial history. It indicates precisely why we as a community require strong legislative support and protection, and is also why the likes of the UN, the Council of Europe and others have come out unequivocally calling for an Irish Language Act. 2 years ago, the question of Irish language and rights for Irish speakers had completely fallen off the political radar scale. Consent in the new Northern Ireland was being managed through ideology and hegemony, and in our case, things like good relations and T-box strategies. But by 2017, it was catapulted into the main political issue. And it was done by an autonomous movement of change, as our good friend Thapelo Mohapi has described it, which emerged through Dearg and is evidenced by the 15,000 people that took the streets of Belfast on the 20th of May last year. It was that movement and that movement alone, no matter what the newsletter or any other media outlets will tell you, it is that movement that catapulted this issue to the centre of the political discourse. And we would see that the language in this movement represents one manifestation of a wider political and social phenomenon, whereas young people are no longer feel obliged to, if you like, follow a particular party line or follow an institutional line through NGOs or whatever, are seeing that they have agency in themselves, and that coming together and organising can affect change. And that's a powerful thing, and that is probably the most important lesson. I know we're going to get the lessons from our campaign that we've learned. As a movement, when we came together at the end of 2016, we had two short-term aims. First off, that people would start to see language rights as human rights. Because previously, a lot of the human rights NGOs even were slightly reluctant to get involved in language issues. They had viewed, because of the hegemony and ideology that I talked about earlier and that managing consent, they had viewed the language as through the binary orange and green glasses. So the people were reluctant to get involved, and that we needed to get them on board, and thankfully we have. And the second was that we wanted our community's voice to be front and centre. We didn't want the media running to politicians to either attack us or support us. We knew that we could articulate our own demands ourselves, and that the more we had an opportunity to do that, the more power that our community would attain. So I'm not going to go into the reasons why an act is important. I think, again, those arguments have all been made previously. The most telling argument is because we exist. We exist as a community of speakers, and we're entitled to rights and protections. I think the much more important question to ask here is why not? And some people have accused, and you'll see it constantly again on Twitter and social media and stuff, some people have said, well, is language so important that it should be a barrier to forming a government? And our kind of response to that would be, well, if something as benign as rights for Irish speakers can prevent the government from being formed, then what type of government do we have? So that opposition, as we've seen through the course of the last 2 years, has been framed around cost, around practical implications in terms of courts and stuff like that there. And we would view that they're all minor details that are specifically designed to avoid dealing with the major issue. We know that the major issue in our history, and the reason why Irish became a minority language, is because of the colonisation of Ireland. Unless you start the conversation at that point, then you can't begin to unravel and deal with the legacy of that and actually deal adequately with the issues that we're talking about. As a settler colonial outpost of the British Empire, it can only ever be this issue. The dispossession, genocide and exploitation on which this state was founded would have almost eradicated our native language and culture. The legacy of our history as a British settler colony, past efforts to build exclusionary state via the one-party rule, and then its evolution from the kind of religious dominance to cultural conformity through the vehicle of like the highly politicised things like Together Building United Communities, T-Buck strategies, and others, and above all, the denial of rights. Irish speakers know that the conversation around what we're doing needs to begin there. It needs to begin in an understanding and acknowledgement of what happened and why this language is minoritized in the first place. And when you think about the North, and you think about the kind of post-colonial vulnerability that exists here, with all the kind of moral aspirations that we hear about shared futures and T-Bucks and moving on from the past, you have to admire the great hoax of it all. You know, like the sheer energy, wealth, strategies and policies that they've invested in concealing and denying the oppressive policies, outcomes, ideas and realities that created these circumstances in the first place. Nobody wants to own up, nobody wants to acknowledge that. But saying this can be problematic. And any form of kind of dissent against colonisation, against empire, is never heard as dissent, but as extremism. And as being anti-progress, even being anti-peace, and against developing community relations, and nothing could be further from the truth, obviously, but this is also part of the great hoax. And every attempt that we've seen, particularly in the last 10 years or so, every attempt to articulate or oppose a vision of identity, the manufacturing of a Northern Irish identity, exposes the determination of those in power to negotiate belonging and rights around how closely people associate with official history and official versions of that history and society in the future. And this is, in previous generations, in the 80s and stuff, this is what has allowed the political development of Irish language organisations and individuals as the authorities try to create the ideal moderate Gaelbor. So kind of just to wrap up on this, I think the narrative, all that narrative being framed in this pseudo-progressive language and the inclusive rhetoric around democratic values, that narrative implies, and this has been said to me on the radio and on TV, and you hear it constantly, it implies explicitly that somehow we're to blame for our own marginalisation and exclusion. If only we could be more moderate. If only we could do more to encourage others to engage with Irish. If only we could convince people that they have nothing to fear. But none of that rhetoric or soundbites stands up to any reality. Because when they talk about respect for law and order, what does respect for law and order mean? We still have a penal law in place which prevents Irish being used in courts. What does brighter future mean when Irish schools are still being denied special educational needs facilities and face major hurdles just to get off the ground? What does a shared future mean when Irish is deemed a single identity issue, not worthy of recognition or funding? And what does shared spaces mean when Irish is banned from public signage? What does respect mean when our language and community are constantly sneered at and ridiculed by the largest party in the state? Our campaign has exposed some of these fundamental questions, whilst at the same time remaining positive, inclusive and participatory. More people are learning the language because of the campaign. More people know the language exists because of the campaign, and through the leadership of the campaign, young people have learned that they do have agency, and that history hasn't ended, and that the language has more exposure with all the benefits that brings for a small minority community that it has had in over 100 years.
Thanks very much, Kieran. I'm going to turn now to Bernie, and the sort of question that we were asking people was, could you tell us a little bit about the kind of activism that you've been involved in? So I'm a bit hesitant about asking you that, because we have a limited amount of time. But if you could, maybe just pick out, the sort of purpose of the thing is to sort of focus in on social change, how social change happens, and we're trying to get a sense just before we open it up, and I'll do one more round of questions to yourself, but if you just give us a flavour of the kind of activism that you have and that you've been involved in.
Right, in a very short synopsis, but I'm going to keep it short to get on to the more interesting part. First of all, apologies for being very late. The first lesson that I have failed to learn through my entire life is that everything takes longer than I think it will. And so with the intention of being here in time from a previous meeting that started at 10 o'clock on the illustrious hill at Stormont, which couldn't pass up, it took me longer to get rid of them and get back down the hill and through the red lights and have too many endorsements on the license to go through any more red lights. So that's my excuse. In terms of activism and thinking about it, what I was trying to pick out from my own existence, now that I have reached, the advanced decade of 70 what the hell have I been doing with my entire life? Or what is it I thought I was doing around activism? And when you get to be a grandparent, you realise I knew something when I was young that I kind of forgot when I was older, and my grandchildren are teaching me again that the most complex of ideas can still be explained in very simple language. Kind of get that as you go through life. So while I was trying to think of what was it I'm trying to do, I think right from the start, as a young person, and I think it's inherent in young people, I think young people have an internal, for want of a better word, moral or justice or fairness concept. I think that young people have natural curiosity. Young people want to find answers that are not an insult to their intellect and view of the world. And part of what we do in education and informal education is we try and no longer are we allowed to beat it out of them, but we coerce it out of them before they actually reach their teenage years and become what might be called a problem to society. And so as a young person, I think I was always curious, active, and in terms of the context in which I grew up, had a very high sense of what constituted fairness and justice and decency and the difference between right and wrong. What I didn't know as a young person, and I'm talking here about a young person not maybe even having reached the age of 12, what I didn't understand was that everybody already knew that. That's what I didn't know. That everybody in the world knows already the whole world's a mess. I thought as a young person that I had figured this out all by myself. And that the key activism I needed to be involved in, like chicken licking, I don't know, do you know the story of chicken licking? An acorn fell on his head. Chicken licking already knew that the world was in a bad state, and he thought that the sky was beginning to fall down. And so the story progresses as to how chicken licking tried to let all the people who needed to know that the sky was falling down, and if somebody didn't do something, we were all in trouble. So my activism was no more sophisticated than that of chicken licking. I knew from a very early age there was something seriously wrong with the world. My mother was a good person, I knew that. My father was a hard-working, good person. Then how come we were poor? When there were other fathers and mothers who weren't any more hard-working, any better than mine, who weren't. How did that happen? I was curious. The more I looked at it, I realized the reason it happens is because the world's not fair. The reason it's happening is that people get used by other people, and it's me. And I said, how did these people get more money than my parents? They didn't. their grandparents had more money than my grandparents. And so I'm pulling on a piece of rope, and everywhere I looked, I realised at the very beginning, somebody stole it. Somebody stole it from somebody else. That's how it happened. How did the Queen of England get to be rich? My father taught me before he died when I was 9. My mother used to say, she's a noble and gracious lady. My father used to say, yes, she is. She is also an inheritor of a butcher's apron and a receiver of stolen goods. That may seem extreme and harsh, and I didn't understand it at the time. But that, with due respect to the monarch, is exactly what she is. I discovered in my activism as I went along, she wasn't the only monarch. She was the one we knew from our colonial history. But the world was full of people who intergenerationally were the receivers of stolen goods. And they continued to do it. The British Empire was created, the Portuguese Empire, white Europe, armed with weapons and religion, armed with violence and with God, toured the world, stealing your wealth, stealing our wealth, stealing your wealth, stealing your people, stealing our people, stealing our intellect, stealing our children. It took me a long activism to get to the point of realising that. And then my activism was, how do we get it back? How do we get it back? How do the people of the world, in the interests of the people of the world, get back for all the people of the world that which has been stolen? That kind of sums up my activism. I have tried everything. I have tried everything. And there's things then that you come to, what are the lessons that you learn? 1, everything takes longer than you think it will. And 2, as I said, it's not that the people didn't know. You know, when we say the people in authority, the people with clout, the people that we have always been told know more than us, they mustn't have known it, or they would have done something about it. The realisation, they all know it. They are a part of it happening and a part of its continuation. Not all of them consciously and deliberately. And not all of those holding it up benefit from doing so. And it's not easy to get it back. No weight of moral, intellectual argument, no academic discussion, no evidential base that will prove beyond all reasonable doubt that it doesn't actually belong to them will encourage the people who own it to hand it back. Yes. Try that. That didn't work. And you understand it doesn't work because it wouldn't necessarily work for you either. Wouldn't necessarily work for you either. If I actually said to somebody here, sorry, but you know your child that you're pushing on to get into the good school with the good blazer and the good academic record, the very fact you're doing it is keeping this child from a decent education. You wouldn't give it up. You wouldn't give it up. You'd say, look, I'm very sorry, and let me see what we can do to stop that happening again. But no, my child needs now. So sometimes our activism for ourselves is actually living in the present, the future we want to see. And that's very hard at an individual level, to live in the present, the future you want to see. That's much more challenging than preaching and proselytizing to everybody else how the world should be different and what they should do about it. I think the other activism, and I try to do that. I wish to announce now that I'm not doing very well at it, but I keep trying. The other thing that I've been active in is, and learning from it, is all of us went through a period of, where the rhetoric and the sloganizing, and we think we know it all. The ends justify the means. I don't want to get into a moral argument on that, but I have discovered in the course of my life that the means are a key determinant of the end. If you know what I mean by that. How you do the thing, the methodology and the approach actually shapes the end goal before you even get there. That's part of where South Africa is in the mess it's in. That's part of how we're in the mess that we're in. Is that we didn't fully and well enough understand that the approach determined the end before we got anywhere near it. So that those of us who had a vision of a different end didn't see it being closed off step by step, day by day, intentionally or unintentionally, so that by the time that we got to where we thought we were going, it wasn't the place we thought we were. And those of us who saw that a wee bit earlier then become in a new colonization, the colonization of language for the distortion of ideas, which is about telling us that we are somewhere that we're not. And you go back to children's stories, the emperors have no clothes. And we're all caught up in the story about criticizing and re-evaluating and planning and figuring out. But there are things that have remained core through all my activism. Nobody owns the people. Nobody owns it. Not God, not the Pope, not the King, not the Queen, not the government, and not the would-be leaders of the revolution. Nobody owns the people. There are fundamentals through the whole of the socialization of humanity. There is a fundamental model that is tied and tested. Is that unless you are prepared in determining what are your rights and your entitlements, to guard those with your life for your neighbour, whoever your neighbour may be, this doesn't work. It doesn't work. So everything that you want for yourself has to be something you would give to every other human being alive. There is no other simple bottom line. And therefore the core narrative is a narrative around human rights. No matter how that is colonized by a right-wing, a limited, no matter how it's colonized, the core issue is the intrinsic dignity of the individual human being in the social, economic, political, environmental context. I've learned as my activism has grown, because people talk about the end of the world is coming. It is not. Let me assure you, the end of the world ain't coming. The end of this species may well be a damn sight closer than any of us know. But the world will deal with us, remove us, and recover from us. We are not the center of the earth. We are not the center of the universe. We may well be a small, mutant, parasitic species whose tenure in the longevity of the universe may be minusculely short. But while we're here, our survival depends on the recognition of the intrinsic dignity of all of us as different, diverse, but equal. And unless we organise a social, economic, cultural, ecological framework for our collective survival that recognise that, we're all doomed. My activism leads me to believe that the only economic policy globally that enables that to happen, and I think it's very interesting that the economic framework that allows that to happen is called socialism, because socialism is not a social philosophy, it's an economic philosophy. And the only social, organisational that allows that to happen is democracy. And the only democracy that really works is a participative democracy of the right of every citizen to speak for themselves, to freely associate around the issues that interest them, and to have an equal right to put them forward. And the balance of my interest against your interest, not my right against your right, my interest against your interest, my need against your need, in a framework of equal access to rights, is the only democratic way forward. What stands in the way of that is what we currently call democracy and the way we organise it. It is an outdated system that is aimed to protect the status quo and the existing economic system. Participative democracy changes it. It is a system that has created nation states. And one of the hardest things for us here to realise is, in its final analysis, nationalism itself is a limiting philosophy for people of equal standing. Colonialism creates the need for national liberation movements. Colonialism and oppression creates the need for people to make shared identities across diverse interests. But every time we prioritise falling in behind the most powerful, falling in behind the most articulate, falling in behind the lowest common denominator that will take us a step forward, the people at the bottom lose. I've learned that. So where have I got to now? In my activism now, I believe that the best place in the world to live, to work, to organise, the most effective place to make social change is wherever you find the margin, as far out as you can go, wherever you can find the people who are furthest from the table, wherever you can find the people who believe in the moment they have the least, because they are the best people. They have nothing to lose. They are the most creative people because they survive the most. They are the most determined people because they have the places to go, and because they cannot survive other than collectively. They are the most humane and the kindest people. So my activism in all my life is, as the bandwagon moves forward, Bernadette, keep moving to the back.
Encompassed the two things. She's told us a bit about her activism, and she's also answered, I think, what was really going to be my next question, which was, what are the key kind of lessons from the activism that you've been involved in? And I'm wondering, Thapelo, if maybe you could reflect on that and give us maybe one or two. What would you say is the biggest lesson that you have learnt from the work that you have been involved in? And if you could maybe just say us a little bit about that, or if there's more than one, all the better. But you know, what would you say are the biggest lessons?
Thank you very much once again. I think for me, coming from a movement where there's a culture of sharing ideas and coming together, where your neighbor's problems becomes your problem, where the neighbor's struggle becomes your struggle. Yesterday I was touched. One of the people who attended said, if you are watching somebody next door being evicted, you should do something, because tomorrow it might be you. So it's coming to you. So I think for me that's the learning. And the other part is learning that people who, when they are united, working together, democratically from the grassroots, from below, because that's what most of the people in government, in power, whether it's the monarchy or anywhere else, fail to understand that when you are in authority or in power, it's because of the people. And the people are actually the government. And if you do not continuously, because there's this, we are where we are today because of the detachment between the people in power and the people at grassroots. People where once they get into power, like in South Africa, they forget the fact that they were there because, why in fact they were there. They forget the ideology behind what has happened. But one thing that I want to leave out is, not leave out in fact, is that when they came to actually take away what was ours, whether it's resources or land, they started taking even our identity, our language, who we are. And my appeal would be to Irish people, don't allow that to happen. Once they say, forget about who you are, speak in this certain way which they brought into your, that's when they completely destroy you. Because that's where we come from, that's who we are, that's our identity, that's our background, that's we need not to compromise it at any stage. That's why I said I'm very proud of the choir, because the choir did not include Afrikaans, which is a language that was forcefully on us as black people in South Africa to actually speak. Like in 1976, where people were actually told that they were going to be taught in Afrikaans in school. And young people stood up and said, no, we're not going to do that. We want our identity. Because once identity is taken away from you, your language, everything else follows. So it is very important that I convey this message that do not compromise who you are.
Give us a couple of lessons from the activism that you've been involved in that you think are worth, and this is in the spirit of Sean and Marissa's site, where we're trying to put these lessons together so that we can all be more effective at doing exactly what Bernie's been saying we should be at.
Yeah, well, I think the first practical lesson I will implore everyone to take on board is to try and kickstart a Gaelic football career at 35. It's part of your recognition because it's that good for the health. But I suppose a number of short kind of practical lessons from our campaign, and these are universally true, and they're not unique in any way to us, but I suppose what really helped us was that we were able to create spaces which encourage people from all different backgrounds, of all different abilities, of all different talents, and of all different time capacity stuff to get involved, to become involved. So whether you were at every meeting and organising, or whether you were a P7 student in a Gaelic school writing a letter to Arlene Foster, or while you were just somebody posting a short video on YouTube or up on Facebook, every single person felt ownership of the campaign, and they felt that activism in terms of Dearg and the struggle for language rights was merely an extension of their existing activism, of what they were doing, be it in a youth club or be it in the school, or wherever else that they were working to promote the Irish language. So that sense of one community, that sense of it being some oversight and mobilisation, demonstrates just how inherently weak our government is. It's also very, very important, and both Thapelo and Bernie have both touched on this, that power resides with communities and with people, and not with institutions and government. And one of the things that we were successful in doing is in wrestling back that power from politicians and placing it firmly and we set the pace, we set the agenda, we dictated the narrative, and then we asked, which is hard democracy, for all its flaws, it meant to work. We tell politicians what we want, and then hold them to account for the delivery. That's the deal is meant to be, although it hasn't really worked that way. I think the key point for us is the very strong nature that we have had throughout the history of the revival here, particularly from the 60s on, of kind of building our own institutions when the state offered no support, is what has stood by us the most and is key to the effective nature of our campaign. I think, the fact that our community was historically and even present day excluded, if you like, from the state has politicised our community from the get-go. And, that's why the Dearg or the Irish language community, they don't view themselves, we don't view ourselves as a protest movement. This is a community that comes out, and people see absolutely no distinction between going to a Dearg protest outside Stirling on a Tuesday and then taking the underage for like Abalahli that evening. It's all part of the same mechanism, and it's all part of building and not waiting on the state. Certainly lobbying and campaigning the state for your rights and for your entitlement and doing that effectively, but not waiting on them either. Go out and build it. Bernie touched on this. Live the life you want to see in the future today. And as our good friend Thapelo Mohapi constantly says, build the republic where you stand. Build it, and that is the idea around Mona and other organisations like that. Another, like in the midst of the Dearg campaign, we thought it would be a good idea to set up an independent Irish medium football club, Abalahli, with all the time constraints and stuff that place, and then with obviously the injuries that the result of that. But because certainly the Irish language community here in Belfast has a very strong mantra, and that have right, Johnny, don't talk about it, do it. Go out and build it. Don't wait on the state, build it today for your community, and certainly that's, I think, something that's been key to our success. And I think if one of the questions that I would like to fire out to Bernadette and the Thapelo one and others is around, if you like, for us, we're rooted in marginalised and excluded communities. This community here in the Springfield area has historically been one of the most socially deprived areas in the north, if not in the UK. And even though we're focusing on Irish language, the Irish Language Act and rights for Irish speakers, we also want to have a bigger impact on issues of social justice that are important. We all know the Irish Language Act that there is, but there's food banks open in this area. Then no progress has been made. And what we would like to look at is how do we unpick the lessons that we've learned from the Dearg in terms of our activism and to form that as part of a broader social front that will actually bring about real change, in the ordinary people's lives, and people in Balmerfield, people in Turf Lodge, people in Dungannon, Phobail, and wherever else they may live. Because we think we have something to offer, but we don't have all the answers. And we need to come together, and that idea of kind of drawing the dots of this intersectionality or whatever it's called, that's something that would be keen to kind of learn more about, if you like.
Thanks very much, Kim. I want to see if anybody here has a question or a contribution that they want to make their own lessons or ideas to add to these. I think you'll agree that what we've heard has been a pretty rich set of things, so I think the website's already triggering a lot of very deep and profound ideas. So yourself?
Just a question for the panelists in relation to tensions between political society and civil society and social movements. I know in the example of South Africa, because you're probably slightly further down the lane in terms of the institutionalizations of former malcontents, and I suppose drawn out, lessons from South Africa in terms of how social movements are navigating the new terrain in terms of the ANC being in government, and I suppose where we are in our transition in the north in relation to tensions between civil society and political society, where we need political alliances, where the line is drawn those alliances, and maybe draw out some of the lessons that we have there.
Anybody else? Maybe take a couple if there's anyone else who wants to. Yourself?
Just a quick question, and I want to say thanks to everyone who's really good talk by everyone. But in terms of Dearg, it was just interesting what you were saying about how the movement you were talking about is 52,000 strong, and the numbers on Jam Jar is quite considerably smaller than that, and even with a smaller number, we I think with good like kind of practices in terms of being inclusive and our democracy inside the movement. But what are the lessons? Maybe I'm throwing this out to all the panel in some ways, in terms of as your movement grows, how do you deal with more people coming on board? How do you keep it that everyone can have a say and who makes decisions and what's the experience and the lessons around that?
Yourself?
Mine is a compliment and probably just a comment. I'm very impressed at the fact that Bernadette just spoke out so freely, about the wealth that was stolen from other countries by the monarch, because it's something that some of us see, every day, and our parents spoke about, and you get to see it, now that you this side of the ocean, you see it and you're like, really? Okay, this is what it is. And it's not something that's spoken about every day, and some people are so much denial about it. So to hear it being spoken of like this in an event like this, for me is big. It's I don't know, it boosts you inside, and you feel that whatever you fight for every day is worth the fight. And just to hear as well, when people talk about fighting for a language, I come from a country whereby my language is slowly but surely shrinking. Even in government, people get addressed in a different language, and you feel speaking in your language is kind of like, it's not worth it. People won't even understand you. And first of all, you find children not even speaking in your language, and you start speaking in a foreign language, or you're forced to speak in another certain language. But how do you then fight, maybe, how do you fight within your own community to actually not find yourself probably being apologetic, if I may use that word, because you find yourself being a bit apologetic when you speak your language. You're not speaking the language that you're expected to be speaking or addressing other people, but your language is, it becomes foreign in a certain way. How do you fight when your voice has been shrunk into a little corner?
Okay, do you want to start, Bernie? Will you give a go on a couple of times? We might have time, I don't know if Sean or Marissa or anybody can advise, we might have time for another round of questions after this, so people can be thinking, is that right? Is that okay? Or do you
If people are comfortable, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So Bernie?
I think the question about tension, growth, come together very easily, and I think you're slightly different. I think in both of those, there's an issue of transparency. I think that's the one that we're least good at. The tension is good. I have to say, I love it. I have to own up here. Tension, nothing works where there's no tension. It's tension that's holding us all upright at the minute. It's tension that keeps bridges from falling down into the water. Nothing actually works without tension. But it's how, first of all, we're educated into believing that tension is bad. We're also actually educated into believing that stress is bad, so that we can no longer cope with it, and our inability to manage and cope with stress is killing us socially. It's killing our mental and emotional health. And the fear of tension is deliberately created from childhood at an individual level, but through education and through social engagement. To create tension is bad manners. We all know that.
Yes.
We all know that. You can't go to the family Christmas dinner and talk politics, because God forbid, in the middle of too much food, somebody will have an intelligent conversation. So it's not allowed. So the first thing we have to know is that tension is to be expected if we're talking about a framework where we're balancing my personal interest against the group collective interest of which I am a part, against the group collective interest of people I don't even like, within a framework that all of us are equal and that we have to coexist. What about that would you expect not to create tension? So tension is where the matter is resolved. The problem with tension is the lack of transparency and the lack of intellectual honesty that's going on. So the people who create tension are bad people from the position of power and the status quo. You're rocking the boat. For example, if we look at the reproductive rights, if we look at gay rights and marriage equality, there is an intelligent argument, there's a tactical argument to be had, which might be around Trotsky's transitional demands for those who are interested. Skip that phrase for those who are not. But about the tactics of looking, in what order, what do we do today and how do we do it? So that we can make progress today without limiting where we're going tomorrow. And how can we all work together today, recognizing that while we're all totally unified on this, we may have a different perspective on something else, or a different perspective on the next development of this. The only way we can do that effectively, by everybody being honest about where they are and where they want to go. Because where Bernadette's going is the end of the road. There ain't nobody I have ever met in the 71 years of my life who is a more extreme person than me, who is a more dangerous person than me, who is harder to get along with or work with than me. And I'm the only person who has to live with me every day. So I totally recognize that most of the people in this room will be getting off this bus before me, even though I'm older than you. Because as long as I'm, see when you keep moving to the back, you see when you keep gravitating to the bottom, this is perpetual motion. There is no end to the kind. I discovered when I was 8, I have to tell you what you're dealing with here. When I was about 8 years of age, I had a school jotter. I had discovered tens, for those of you who know about maths, tens, units, tens, hundreds, and thousands. For those who aren't familiar with the concept, it's when you know there's a 1 and then you put a naught to it. You put another naught to it, it's 100, and another naught to it, it's 1,000. I sat, and by the process of experiential learning, I added noughts for a whole page and turned it at another page and turned it at another page before I realized there is no end to the counting. At the age of 8, I discovered the concept of infinity by simply trying to add noughts to see at which point would you come to the very last number. So there is no end to social change. As long as the world exists, we will be trying to improve it in the context in which it exists. It never ends. As it meets the requirement of some individuals, for example, in the rights to our own language, if we achieve that, there will be some who will stop there and will deny the right of you to speak your own language here in this place, who will deny bilingualism to the immigrant community. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't allow them to work with you now. It means you should know that their usefulness is fairly limited. And you should make sure that they do not take over the agenda of a forward movement. So you learn how to work with people. One of the things that we have to be wary about ourselves is we create at every stage of struggle. We create the institutions that hold back the next stage. Because as the creator, we can't let go of them again. I work in an organisation I helped to found. I drive it insane because I am preoccupied with dismantling it. Routinely dismantling it as a necessary part of a process, because the organisation that we institution, you know, the rules, regulations, the structure that we created in 1998 couldn't possibly be appropriate and adequate for the work that we're now doing in 2018. We have, in order to change, in order to stay true to the concept, the infrastructure always has to be strong enough to hold it up, democratic enough, fit for purpose, which means it's the institutions that must always be dismantled. It's the institutions that must always be changed, not the people. So we created, you know, and here's the reality. We, the participatory democracy people that are so good, we created the ANC in your country. We created Sinn Féin in this one. We created the DUP. Whatever possessed us to do those things, they seem to be, and probably were a good idea for somebody at that time. And there are good people in those organisations who can't let go of them. And you know what? They are not encouraged in the process of institutionally let going of them by insulting them, by telling them that they are useless and always were useless. No. They are addicted, because it's very addictive. Addictive to the power that institutional strength gives. And they fear to hold themselves up. And without taking due care not to let it happen, it will happen to you. It will happen to you. It will happen to us all. Because when you get to the point, my country right or wrong, my party right or wrong, my organisation right or wrong, my political idea right or wrong, you're already there. How do you stop being embarrassed? Practice. Do you know what I've discovered? Here's one thing I've discovered at the age of 70. I am unapologetically the most shameless person you will ever meet. I disposed of shame years ago. I'm having a current argument about direct provision. A young trans woman died in direct provision. And part of my argument at the minute is, you may see me on Twitter challenging every young woman who feels ashamed. I keep saying to her, why, what did you do? What did you do? Why are you ashamed that this young woman died? Shame belongs to the government that is shameless. But as long as you're ashamed by it, you're disempowered by it. So don't be embarrassed, be angry. Don't be ashamed, be outraged. And don't be whining, be active. So when you're most embarrassed about speaking your language, speak it out. When you have nobody else to hear the sound of your own language, talk to yourself in the mirror until, and here's, as I say to young women, until you can, do this. Lift your shoulders up. Put your shoulders back. Put them back down again. That raises your diaphragm. And after that, shout whatever it is you thought you were too embarrassed to say.
an appointment. And just give you a couple of minutes.
Yeah, well, very difficult to follow. So I would like to say everything I was going to say. Bernie said it. I was just reminded, I was kind of, as I said earlier in the talk, I was kind of jotting a few notes down today to help me through my coding list haze here. And I was reminded of a quote from the American historian Howard Zinn, and he talked about, just referencing the question that Niall had there earlier, about how do you get this balance between the street and the politics and the party and the organisation or the movement on the outside. And what he talked about at the end, the really critical thing isn't who's sitting in the seat of power, but who's sitting on the streets, who's sitting in the cafeterias, who's sitting in the factories, who's out protesting, who's out occupying. That's the thing that determines change, and not who's sitting. And once we think, oh sure, we've got Ciarán, we've got Michael, or Thapelo, or even Bernie in a position of power, we can all go back to the house. That is when things start to go wrong. And I think the space that's been created, particularly in the last couple of years, and particularly in the absence of government, has allowed people to critically reflect on the period post-Good Friday. And perhaps we all allowed ourselves, if we're being honest, to be slightly demobilised. And we allowed our voices to be drowned out, caught up in the hysteria of the peace process above all else. And that anything that we do that criticises what's taking place, the fact that inequalities in this area haven't been tackled, is in some way to put the peace process in danger. And we saw this right up until very, very recently with the Fresh Start Agreement, which is bringing in horrendous austerity, targeting the most vulnerable, the weakest in our society. And, you know, there was meant to be a protest in the town organised by the trade unions, and in the last minute it was withdrawn in the interest of the peace process. And I think, you know, that we cannot return to the critical voices, particularly given the onslaught we're all facing now, are incredibly important. And it's our job as individuals, as organisations, as movements, as people, to constantly, no matter who's in that position of power, to constantly hold their feet to the fire. We're not going to invest all our trust in them to bring about all the change that's necessary, but what we will do is demand that they use whatever power they have as effectively as possible to try and help, particularly the most vulnerable and the weakest in our society. That's what we could do, and I think that's how we can try and alleviate some of those tensions. Just to turn your question, Sipo, as well, I mean, that's something that, again, is constantly kind of banded about, and there's been a false equivalence created in terms of the debate around language rights in the North, whereby my right, or my assertion of rights as an Irish speaker, to have my voice heard and see my language recognised and to scale on saying and stuff, there's an equivalent between that and people who don't want it to. And, you know, it's incredibly frustrating when you're dealing with this, but even in the media and stuff, you know, to do this balance. And, you know, you'll hear those that are opposed to rights, you know, they've moved beyond the leprechaun language for the most part, they've moved beyond that type of terminology, and they talk about the fact that, you know, I have nothing against Irish, I just don't want to see it, I don't want to hear it, and I don't want any money being spent on it, you know. And it's the same type of supremacist attitude, and I pointed this out on the radio a few months ago, and both the presenter and the guy I was arguing against were aghast at the fact, you know, they were saying that there's a parallel between that type of attitude and supremacist attitudes of whites in the southern states of America. We're saying, you know, we've nothing against our black community, we just don't want to share our cafeterias with them. We don't have to look at, we don't want our kids going to the same school as we've nothing against them. And that type of mentality, although completely different impacts in terms of how they affect people, is what we're challenging. And Bernie's 100% right. We have a saying in Irish, Baha Changi Gil words, for a language to survive, you need to speak it, and speak it regularly.
I think, before you start, can I just ask a question? Maybe you could mention something earlier about the sort of empowerment you get with being part of a social movement and being empowerment. Understand what I'm saying? But how you become empowered, about how you grow, as being part of a movement, even if you don't get the outcomes that you're looking for at the end of the movement. Could you talk a bit more about that?
So your question was, you just repeat it?
Well, you mentioned earlier about being part of the movement and how you grow and
be empowered as a group of people, even if you didn't get your final outcome of what you were aiming for at the end. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?
I think the question is personally for you. I think I can interpret
Yes,
it
go ahead.
is the actual taking part in a social movement, how that makes you feel more strong and powerful in
Yes.
yourself.
Yes, thanks,
Could you
Mark.
talk more about that?
That's great.
Okay, thank you very much. I was going to say in my 12 years of activism, young as I am, I have learned that if there are no tensions, if there are no robust debates, if there are no people with egos within and run out and so on, you need to question to say maybe there's something that we are not doing right. Because there must be people who are questioning what you are doing. And as leaders of the struggles at grassroots level, we must accept criticism. And you must be critical as well of other people. So it must work in that way. And that's how the movement has survived. But mostly our movement, as it is, it has so many people, the 52,000, and still continuously growing. Because we have not combined our own entire database, is that we are structured in a way which meetings and communications within the movement is a constant thing. For instance, we have a branch, and branches will have meetings once a month, and the committee of the branch will have meetings once a week. And then we have what is called a general assembly, where all our 48 branches will come together in one hall, and then people started sharing ideas of how they were facing evictions, and others will come with ideas of how they fought an evictions, so that the other branch can learn from the other one, so they're sharing. So these constant meetings that are held are actually making the movement not to be detached from the people on the ground. I don't know whether I covered that very well. But also I want to touch on the issue. Myself and Sean, we were watching the South African Parliament yesterday. And it's amazing how people can speak the language of the colonizer as black and be so proud that, you know what, I speak English, you know, and be proud of the fact that I speak English better than you and I can quote and in some way. And I think this has actually, maybe we need to first and foremost decolonize our brains, decolonize our minds. Because I sometimes undermine, people who speak Zulu. And if you can't speak English, especially in my country, it's seen as a disgraced, uneducated person. But if somebody can't speak their own language, and then they speak English better, taken to better schools elsewhere where they learn to master the language of the oppressor. You are taken as, you know, we look up to those people, but our own people who master our own language are like, these people are backwards, you know, and so on. So that's the way things have gone. I would have hoped that in the new dispensation, or the so-called new dispensation in South Africa, some of the ethnic languages would have been prioritized. Our constitution rarely comes out in the ethnic languages. So if you ask for a South African constitution today from a politician, they'll give you a copy of an English version of it. So that's the thing. And the other one is the monarchy. It reminds me where I come from. The king was going to have a birthday, you know, the big day. But we were asked as the community to contribute 5 rand so that that's a rate of superior and the fact that I don't know in other countries, but in Africa, when His Majesty had said it's final, you can't question. These are human beings we are living with on earth, and they should survive through collecting from people. And if if you question, the 2014, 2015, there was xenophobia attacks in South Africa where our brothers and sisters from the Southern Africa were driven off because they coming to take our jobs and so on. You know this thing with the Trump that has been raised recently. And that came from the king, the Zulu king himself. And as I was addressing, and I said, no. Let's not go beyond that. It is because somebody who is in power, in authority, has said that these people must be attacked and removed, and that's why we are here where we are. And I was really criticized that how can you speak about the king like that? Who are you? Who the hell are you? You are in our province, because I'm not actually from KZN. Why do you are coming in here to actually break the... I was like, no, there's no one superior than anyone else in the world. And as soon as we realize that, it's well and good. Maybe coming to the last one, when you belong to Abalahli Basemondjolo, the movement, you don't just belong to a movement, but you belong to a home where you are appreciated. You know that's one thing for sure, because from the ANC, we all come from the ANC. We hope that the ANC was the home, but it turns out that the ANC only looks certain interest of certain people. For instance, if your surname is not Zuma and Begi or Ramaphosa, you are not going to be considered as important or human or part of that. But in Abalahli Basemondjolo, you come to a home where you are actually allowed to even speak your own language, to speak in the language that we all understand. You come to a home where you are told you are more important than you think you are, and where you are told that you deserve a home, that you deserve to live a better life, where you are educated about the Constitution. The Constitution of the country says you must live in this way, you must be respected in this way. So we've created not a movement as an ordinary movement, but a home for everyone to come, sit, and engage, and their views be listened, because that's what's important. People feel that the government has not listened to them, and that's why the government does not respond to their needs. But when they come to the movement, they come to people who are sharing the same, who are facing the same struggle, who are facing the same problems, who are actually sharing. And then you feel like, well, I'm a master, I can actually give some so-and-so a way of preventing eviction. I feel that my view is listened, and we combine minutes in the language, people that, and then we read them in the General Assembly, and you say, Sean has said this, and Sean would like, wow, in the ANC I've never had this being important, the way I actually recognize what I've said, and it's been, made, written down, and it's taken forward, and it's going to be something that we are engaging on. So people feel that there's a movement that actually makes them special, makes them important, and listen to them, because they have not been listened by the political parties. But in the movement, that's where, in fact, our agenda in the movements, when we have the General Assembly, where about more than 2,000 people will be flocking in a hall, and we would say, can we raise an agenda? It will not come from the leadership, it will come from the people. And then the people will raise hands. And we will take, even if it takes us 2 hours, we will discuss those issues with the people and see where we come from. So that's why we are saying that it is only when people democratically organize from the grassroots, from below, that we can have solutions. Because sometimes it's the people who have solutions to their own problems, but sometimes they don't realize that they have the solutions. And they assume that the leadership and political parties are the ones who will bring solutions to their problems. But in this case, in our movement, people have learned that, no, I'm actually the ones who can come up with solutions with our problems. When people say we want to connect electricity, we want to connect water, we want to connect our own, create our own authority, it doesn't come from the leadership, it comes from the people on the ground. So, no, we can do plumbing, I'm a plumber, I can show you where the water is. While the government is still providing water and electricity for the rich and the elite, let us go and connect where they are. So that we also, maybe government is still busy with important people once they realize that you also need water, once they realize that you also need water as the poor people, maybe they will find us out along the way because we need water to survive for now. Maybe one day when they realize that we need electricity, they will find us that we're already connected into electricity. So those are the discussions that are taking place in what is called the home of Abalahli. We call it the living politics, the politics which speaks to people, to the fact that we need water, we need electricity, we need to survive, we need to thrive. It does not speak about who's going to be in charge, who must we vote for in order to be in power, because politicians have already failed us, and that's why we've created this authority. Thank you.
Thank Bernie and Thapelo and Ciarán. Ciarán had a hospital appointment that he had to go to. I'd also like to congratulate again Sean and Marissa and TPR and thank Lord Namona for I think there's food. If you couldn't smell it, I could.
Sorry. Just one more thing. If any of you are about tomorrow at 5 o'clock, Zelda Holtzman will be speaking at Féile, which will be another riveting piece of input from people who've been walking in the shoes in South Africa for the last 20 years, from the freedom struggle right up to the modern period. Okay?
What's wrong? Somebody better left down. Alright, that's brilliant. Are you feeling okay? So concise as well. Okay, thank you. Thank you.